Throughout the Second World War, there were a number of female spies who worked behind enemy lines in France. British Special Operations Executive recruited a number of women who they believed were suitable for working with the French resistance. However, being a spy was incredibly dangerous, and the German Gestapo would hunt them, and then once captured they were tortured and many were executed. There was a female spy who was known for her incredible bravery during World War II, and she was known for her very good shot and was very courageous. Diana Rowden, however, met an incredibly brutal and bloody end inside of a concentration camp, and she was burned alive inside of the concentration camp's crematoria. Join us today as we look at the horrific execution of Diana Rowden, the female spy burned alive. And remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Diana Hope Rowden was born in England in January 1915, and she was the daughter of a British Army Major. Her parents separated when she was a young child, then she moved with her mother and two young brothers to southern France. She had a very good childhood and would play on the beach with her brothers, fishing and boating. Her cousin would say she was a bit of a tomboy, but her mother was also regarded as an eccentric and was known to locals as a mad Englishwoman. Rowden attended a number of schools, but her family then returned to England, where she continued her education in Surrey. She lived a very different life to when she was in France, and in 1933, when her education had finished, she returned and tried to become a journalist. But when the Germans invaded France in 1940, she volunteered to work with the French Red Cross, and she worked in an Anglo-American ambulance unit. The Allies being pushed back prevented her from being evacuated from France, and she stayed there until summer 1941, when she managed to escape back to England, passing through Spain and Portugal. But in September 1941, she was keen to continue her role in the war effort, and she joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and then worked in the Department of the Chief of Air Staff as an Assistant Section Officer for Intelligence. She had a minor operation, but then met with a convalescing pilot who had been working for the French section of SOE. She then caught the attention of Special Operations Executive, who saw her file and requested that she should be transferred to the spy branch. Diana was courted to join the resistance work, and in March 1943 she received an invitation to an interview with an officer of SOE F section. During this interview she impressed, and it was said she was very anxious to return to France and work against the Germans, but after speaking to other members of F section, she tried to give it a chance and a go. She was then immediately sent for training, and she did excel in a number of specific fields. Diana was a very good shot and was not shy to attack with her gun, and she was also very good at throwing grenades. This made her a good and confident agent in the field, but she was noted for not being very agile, but she did show a lot of courage. She excelled in fieldcraft and was a pleasant student to teach, but she did struggle to master technical details, and her signalling was regarded as harmful. However, despite this, Diana Rowden displayed much determination, and she would then pass her training. On the 9th of June 1943, she received her first mission, and a week later was sent by Lysander into a moonlit meadow in the Loire Valley. Along with Cecily Lefort and Noor Inayat Khan, the three women linked up and were then sent to work in the field as couriers for different spy networks and intelligence networks in different areas of France. Rowden was sent to work in the Jura Mountains, southeast of Dijon, and she was working just west of the Swiss border. Her cover name was Juliette Rondeau, and she was known as Paulette, with her code name being Chaplin. Whilst in France, she lived in a small room at the back of a hotel, which did have access to a roof, so she could escape if needed. As a courier, Diana was to deliver messages between different organisations and members of the resistance, and she would constantly be travelling on bicycle throughout different neighbourhoods. She even went further afield, such as Marseille, Lyon and Paris, collecting and carrying messages for transmission. On one of her trips to Marseille, the Gestapo boarded the train and began to inspect papers, so she locked herself in the toilet until they passed through. The local resistance described her as without fear, and in the evenings she met with different members of the resistance. She then helped in receiving ammunition drops and weapons drops, marking out drop zones with flares, and many of these explosives were used in acts of sabotage against the Germans. Some of these explosives destroyed a factory that were making German tank turrets. However, Diana Rowden's biggest threat came from other spies being captured and interrogated. But a month after she arrived, Another agent, the leader of the acrobat circuit, was arrested, and he had been betrayed by a double agent who infiltrated the network. With this, Diana Rowden went on the run, and she was sheltered in a shop. She stayed here for 3 weeks with another spy, and an elderly widow and her family helped to hide them. However, Diana was being hunted, and to cover her identity, she dyed her hair and changed how she wore it, and she also borrowed other clothes. She dropped her code name and took a new one, and she integrated with the family. However, the other spy she was with received information that a new agent named Benoit would join them, and he arrived at a nearby house. The group then headed to a town where they met another resistance member, and they had a drink at the Café Strasbourg, a place where the circuit did drop intelligence. At 6 they returned, and whilst the mother of the family they were staying with prepared dinner, the door sprung open, and the room was filled with Feld gendarmerie, the German military police who carried machine guns. Immediately, Diana Rowden with the other spies was arrested, and it turned out that Benoit was a fraud, and he later arrested the family at gunpoint. They had to hand over the wireless set which had been used and hidden, and they then looted the home. The family hoped they would see Diana again, and she mentioned how one day she would return to say thank you. However, she was taken to Paris and was held at the Gestapo headquarters in Avenue Foch for 2 weeks. She was then transferred in December 1943 to the women's section of the Fresnes prison, which held many other spies. But on the 13th of May 1944, Diana was moved with 3 other female spies back to Avenue Foch, and 4 other women who were all agents of F section. They were then taken to a railway station with guards who were armed, and they were handcuffed to them. It was said that we were all starting on this journey together in fear, but all of us hoping for something above all, that we would remain together. We had all a taste already of what things could be like. None of us did expect for anything much. We all knew that they could put us to death. I was the only one officially condemned to death, the others were not. But there was always a fugitive ray of hope that some miracle will take place. The women were taken to Germany and were placed in cells in prison in Karlsruhe, and they were then treated like other prisoners. They often heard Allied bombers heading to bomb targets, and the women believed the war would come to an end soon. However, Diana Rowden would not live to see the end of the war. She, along with the women, were taken into the reception room of the prison on the 6th of July 1944, and they were given their belongings and were then handed over to 2 Gestapo agents. They were then took 100 kilometres to Natzweiler-Struthof Concentration Camp, crossing back into France, and their arrival was not expected. Diana believed she would be executed immediately, and women were a rare prisoner at the camp, and the German guards and other prisoners noticed them. Diana, along with the 3 other women, were led through the centre of the camp to the bottom of it by SS men, and they were then held there until that night. It was said that one could see from their appearance that they hadn't come from a camp. They seemed young, they were fairly well groomed, their clothes were not rubbish, their hair was brushed and each had a case in their hand. Diana Rowden, along with the 3 other SOE agents, had been sent to die. She was held in her own cell, and through the window the women managed to speak to each other and other prisoners. But then that evening the horrific executions of the women would come. That evening the women were taken one by one into the crematoria, where they were given an injection, which the doctors believed was lethal. They were then thrown, still alive, into the burning fire of the crematoria. Diana Rowden was led towards the crematoria in the oven, where the doctor gave her an injection telling her it was a vaccination against typhus, and she was then pushed into the oven alive. The prisoners would later tell of the horrific executions of them, including Diana Rowden, and they then said, "We heard low voices in the next room, then the noise of a body being dragged along the floor, and he whispered to me that he could see people being dragged something along the floor, which was below the angle of vision through the fanlight. At the same time that this body was being brought, we heard the noise of heavy breathing and low groaning, and again we heard the same noises and regular groans, as the next 2 insensible women were dragged away. The 4th, however, resisted in the corridor. I heard her say pourquoi, and I heard a voice as I recognised as a doctor, who was in civilian clothes, saying, 'Poor typhus.' We then heard the noise of a struggle and the muffled cries of the woman. I assumed that someone held a hand over her mouth. I heard the woman being dragged away too. She was groaning louder than the others. From the noise of the crematoria oven doors which I heard, I can state definitely that in each case the groaning women were placed immediately into the crematorium oven. When the officials had gone, we went to the crematoria oven, opened the door and saw that there were 4 blackened bodies within. Next morning, in the course of my duties, I had to clear the ashes out of the crematoria oven. I found a pink woman's stocking garter on the floor near it. There were many witnesses, and they spoke of the struggle of the 4th woman who was being shoved into the furnace. It was said, when the last woman was halfway in the oven, she had been put in feet first. She had come to her senses and struggled. As there were sufficient men there, they were able to push her into the oven, but not before she resisted and scratched the executioner's face. It's not known whether Diana Rowden was the woman who struggled or not. However, her execution and killing was incredibly sadistic. She was a woman who was seen as an ideal spy to work with the French resistance. Today she is remembered as one of many female SOE spies who were executed by the Germans, and her story is one which deserves to be told. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.